Republicans plan to make Zohran Mamdani a major focus of next year's midterm elections. The 34-year-old Democratic Socialist is expected to be elected mayor of New York City when voting wraps up 1 week from today. The Hill White House correspondent Julia Manchester is out with a new story today on how Republicans are planning to use Mamdani's election to their advantage. Hey, Julia, so how is this effort going to look? What are we expecting to see from Republicans?
Well, we've seen this effort sort of in the works for quite some time, but I think it really started to get going following House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' official endorsement of Mamdani last week. So essentially, we've seen the House Republican campaign arm and their allies gearing up to tie House Democrats, particularly those located in New Jersey and New York, to Mamdani. We saw last week, following Jeffries' endorsement, they released a digital ad tying House Democrats to Mamdani. And then today they rolled out a new memo essentially detailing how they plan to nationalize this race. And they talked about how this goes beyond the tri-state area or the greater New York City area, that, Zohran Mamdani is essentially the face of the Democratic Party. That's what these Republicans are arguing. A few caveats here. We have seen a number of House Democrats, most prominently Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, backing Mamdani, campaigning with Mamdani. However, there are other House Democrats who have really tried to distance themselves from Mamdani, like Long Island Congress members Laura Gillen and Tom Suozzi. They very much tried to keep Mamdani at arm's length in terms of how they approach them. However, Republicans really steamrolling this effort to, paint Democrats nationwide as being, as Mamdani, characterizes himself as Democratic Socialists.
Is there some risk to the Republican Party that comes with this? It seems like over the past few years when Republicans are attacking Democrats, it's usually on these kind of woke issues, transgender politics, even some defund the police stuff, which they have accused Mamdani of using that kind of rhetoric in the past. But now Mamdani is kind of focusing his entire campaign and what he says he's going to do as mayor on the cost of living. And also, he's a pretty good communicator.
Yeah.
If he ends up being perceived as successful, placing all this focus on him could harm Republican chances, I assume.
Yeah, I think it depends where Republicans are campaigning. I mean, they're saying this is going to work nationwide. However, there are Democratic lawmakers who might be more conservative leaning, and it might be more difficult to make that case, or Democratic lawmakers in other parts of the country where it's difficult to make that connection with Mamdani. Democrats also point out that this isn't the first time House Republicans have tried to nationalize a mayoral race. In 2024, House Republicans tried to tie House Democrats, particularly New York House Democrats, to New York City Mayor Eric Adams when he was facing corruption charges. But we saw that in New York, Democrats, held their own, flipping 4 seats in total in 2024, with one lawmaker, Democratic lawmaker, getting reelected in the state. So I think there certainly is risk, but at the same time, the Republican messaging is also somewhat economic on, Mamdani. We know that Mamdani is certainly trying to communicate how the cost of living is a centerpiece of his campaign, which I think is smart. But you're also seeing Republicans try to paint this, or, present this as a capitalist versus socialist battle, with Republicans being capitalists and Democrats being socialists. I think there are some communities here in the United States, particularly in a state like Florida, for example, which has many ties to New York, where that argument does make sense when you have a lot of people with ties to socialist or communist nations like Cuba or Venezuela. So I think it depends. We'll see how this argument plays out. And it also depends how popular of a mayor Zohran Mamdani is, if he in fact wins in November.
The Republican argument here is that Mamdani is the face of the party, but at the end of the day, he is just running for mayor of New York City. It's a big city, but it's a heavily Democratic city as well. Why not somebody like Mikey Sherrill or Abigail Spanberger, more moderate Democratic candidates running for statewide office in New Jersey and Virginia?
Well, I think it's because Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger typically present themselves as more moderate. And Abigail Spanberger herself, I've just covered her more, so I can speak for this more. She has a more moderate voting record, or a more moderate record than someone like Zohran Mamdani. She's former law enforcement. She's worked with Republicans in Congress. So I think it's more difficult to make that case against someone like a Spanberger versus a Mamdani. And, someone like a Spanberger, look, has been tested. She ran for election and re-election multiple times in Virginia's 7th Congressional District, one of the more competitive congressional districts in the country at the time when she was running. So she has been tested. Zohran Mamdani, even though he's in elected office as an assembly member, he hasn't been tested to that extent. So I think Democrats or Republicans see more of an opportunity there.
Strikes me that Mamdani is kind of a double-edged sword, right? He's very good at communicating, very popular on things like TikTok and Instagram, but also has said some things in the past that Republicans, obviously, as we see here, are going to use against him. What do Democrats in purple states and swing districts think about this? Like, are they worried about this strategy that Mamdani is going to be used against them, that could work?
I think more moderate Democrats or Democrats in swingier states, and Abigail Spanberger told me this herself when I interviewed her a few weeks ago. She said, look, I can't get elected. I would probably not be able to get elected somewhere like New York. And Mamdani probably wouldn't be elected in, statewide in a state like Virginia, for example. So it's all kind of a regional dynamic there. But I think, zeroing in on Mamdani in particular, it's interesting because I think we've seen efforts from him over the past number of weeks to maybe give the impression of moderating himself. He has gone into areas of New York City that have been, historically more conservative leaning, like Staten Island, for example, to try to connect with those voters. He's sitting down on Fox News for interviews. He's releasing ads on Fox News for interviews. And in fact, last week before the final New York City mayoral debate, we heard Mamdani break the news that, in the case if he is elected in November, he will have New York Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch stay in her role. I think that definitely assuaged a lot of concerns from Democrats who were worried about Mamdani's record, particularly on the issue of crime and public safety. Jeffries made that point in an interview over the weekend. So I think we're seeing an effort from Mamdani, but the question is, if he is elected, how does Mamdani govern? We know that the mayor's office, the job of being mayor of New York City is in many ways a thankless job. It's a very difficult job that comes with a lot of scrutiny in the Big Apple. So it's going to be a difficult start, I think, for Mamdani, who is relatively young and inexperienced, but a lot of this will depend on what kind of mayor he is and how he's perceived by the public.
You talked about this not being a new strategy. We've seen Republicans try to paint Democrats with a broad brush when it comes to other national figures like Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer. Democrats do it with President Trump. We used to have this saying in politics that all politics is local, but I don't know, this seems just like more proof that maybe that is a saying of a bygone era.
Yeah, it seems that all politics in many ways are national these days, and that memo released by House Republicans, I think, proved that. When Mamdani was rising following the Democratic primary earlier this year in New York City, I think you saw a lot of Republicans working to tie him to local Democrats, meaning the Democrats in New Jersey or New York State, or even not only at the House member, but also Democrats like Mikey Sherrill, for example, who's running for governor. I think Republicans are looking to broaden that strategy and paint with a very broad brush. The question is, does it work? Does a Democrat running in a swing district in Texas, is he successfully painted as a protege of Zohran Mamdani? We really don't know, but that strategy will be tested.
Be interesting to see how that impacts, if it does, these races that happen next Tuesday, and then obviously off into the midterm elections. For now, let's leave it at that. White House correspondent Julia Manchester, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.